Representing people in hundreds of jury trials, Nathaniel Lee is who you want by your side in the courtroom. You've seen the rest, now hire the best. Contact Lee, Cosell, and Feigley today.
Welcome.
And now, to address the legal concerns of the community,
Please enter your host key followed by
95.1 FM
If you are a
presents
participant,
Legally Speaking.
please press
Here
pound
are
to
today's
continue.
hosts.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank you for listening to our show. We had a record number of attendance last week. We hope the trend continue. There are so many legal issues, but today we start on a solemn note. The first time during my lifetime, we had two major air disasters in 1 week. It was just terrifying to me. My thoughts and prayers go out to the families and the loved ones. What some tragedies. And that's where we start. We have our superstar panel, Attorney Grimes Banks, and also we have Attorney Marlon Primes from the USA. But it was such a tragic way to begin the week, ladies and gentlemen. I've been troubled by these disasters, Milton. I don't know about you guys. It just bothered me because I fly in and out of that DCA airport all the time.
Yeah, I've been very troubled by them, Nate. I got on a plane Thursday morning at 8 o'clock and from LA to Baltimore, which I say that Baltimore has one of the nicest airports I've flown into in years. It's modern, it's not over large, it's not small, it's just very seem like flyer friendly. But I have to admit that I had a little eerie feeling and concern when I got on the flight Thursday morning, and I have to fly back Monday evening. You know, I don't know of any conspiracy theory that's causing these crashes or anything that I could put a finger on, but it is concerning.
Attorney Banks, did that cause you to have any trepidation about flying?
Well, we know that commercial aviation and flying is still the safest mode of transportation. It's safer than driving a car on our highways. These two are disturbing, of course. I didn't realize, was not aware at all of the information that we're finding out regarding how the helicopters navigate in that space. And so questions I might ask may be rookie questions because I just don't know enough about how they conduct helicopter training in that space along with the commercial air travel.
Hey, you finished, Vanita?
Yes.
Okay, I will add to that. When I got back from the funeral last night and I heard that the administration is focusing on the controllers and everything outside of the crash itself directly being investigated and finding fault with diversity and all of these ancillary collateral issues that may have some importance. I don't know, but to direct it at that immediately, it just seems to be very insensitive on the part of our administration. And
well, that's a good point. Starting with Attorney Primes, I mean, it's a whole host of issues, Attorney Primes. What bothered me, and the new president goes in and starts terminating people, including people with the aviation industry. And now they're blaming DEIs. And so there's just an upheaval. There's so many legal stories today. Let's just start with this one. They're firing U.S. attorneys. I mean, what gives? I mean, this thing about air traffic controller, DEI, it was just crazy stuff. I think most people don't realize that air traffic controllers don't get the job like they want. It's a 2-year process.
Yeah, it's a very detailed process. First of all, Nathaniel, it's great to be with you and Milton and Vanita. Yeah, this is really a tragic incident, and I think what should be done is really following standard protocol. Number one is recognizing people that have been killed and honoring them. Full stop. That should be the first thing that you do. And then after that, a full, fair, complete investigation, and then determine, what went wrong and, what you can do to improve. I think the president really jumped the gun by starting out with saying, hey, here who is at fault. And the recent press conference indicated that, he had been admitted that, there had been no factual findings. So it's just really regrettable and not a way that you want to, conduct yourself.
Well, just watching this, it was clear to me that what was the cause of it. I thought that the helicopter running into an airplane runway was just stupid. I mean, it was tragic. I watched it. I'm thinking, why is a helicopter going across the path of travel where the planes land every 2 minutes? It didn't make any sense to me.
Well, again,
But
Attorney Lee, we
yes,
must be cautious about speculating regarding this tragic incident because we know that the National Transportation Safety Bureau, the NTSB, they are the gold standard for investigating air crashes. And I agree wholeheartedly with Attorney Primes that right now we should be honoring the victims and their families and the first responders who, in 7 minutes, I thought I read, rushed to the scene and put their own lives in jeopardy in order to rescue victims, and then ultimately, and so unfortunately and tragically, the rescue mission turned into a recovery mission. And I think that the president's, again, weaponization of DEI, that is his rationale for everything, that may occur in this nation. His comments are dangerous, they are reckless, and should be opposed in the highest degree.
okay, Attorney Prime, what are the rights? All these federal employees, I guess we'll start the largest employer in our country, probably the federal government. What are these rights? I mean, people being, your old stumbled around what you've spent over 30 years with U.S. Attorney's Office. Now they're trying to force lawyers out. They're terminating people in the federal government. What are the rights of these people? What should they be doing?
Well, first of all, I think we have to understand that the public sector, the federal government, is a lot different than the private sector. The federal government employees, they represent the world's largest economy. And we have to understand the past so that we don't repeat those mistakes. There's civil service reform that was passed in the late 70s. And also in 1883, we have the Pendleton Act. And that has its history in my state of Ohio, in that President Garfield, who is from Ohio, was assassinated because an individual thought that he was entitled to a federal job and didn't get it and assassinated the president. And then the Pendleton Act was passed in 1883. So what happened before that time period is that they had the saying that spoils to the victor goes the spoils. And so what that basically meant is that each new administration that would come in, presidential administration, they could fire everybody from the secretary to the people that are doing janitorial services all the way up the chain. The problem with that presented were a number of things. Number one, it was rife with corruption because individuals were actually paying while the president was campaigning to get a potential job. And then once those individuals got in the job, they could ask for payment in order to, do basic tasks, getting permits, making sure that people are safe. And so that's really an untenable position. So we have to understand that we don't want to go back to that.
Right.
And as a consequence, that's why you have the Pendleton Act that we can talk about later. You have the Civil Service Reform Act. You have the Hatch Act to give people assurances that people that are hired to do the people's business, in fact, are doing the people's business, and that's their main priority, as opposed to paying homage to somebody that becomes president of the United States.
Well, here's the problem, though. I don't know what Milton Vanita, but where I understand it, uh, the current administration is trying to get rid of all the attorneys at the U.S. Attorney's Office that worked on the people that attempted to overthrow the federal government. January 6th crowd, those 1,500 people that were prosecuted and the ones that were investigated. Uh, that seemed like overkill to me. What happened when you get a directive to do a specific act as an attorney, and then all of a sudden the administration changed and you could get fired for doing your job?
Well, that's a big problem there, because we want people that are federal employees to honor the Constitution and understand that they work for the people of the United States. And obviously, each president can appoint heads of the agency, and priorities will change. But someone doing the basic core functions of their job should be able to do that without fear that they're going to be retaliated against. So people have to understand that these individuals that were fired, it wasn't a decision that they made unilaterally. They made the decision in terms of prosecution after they presented information to a grand jury regarding individuals that were attempting to stop the transfer of power on January 6th. There was a grand jury that was impaneled of Americans. They determined that there was enough evidence to indict, and they prosecuted. They did the same with all those cases. So for someone to be held accountable when they follow all those procedural steps, have an indictment, it's pending before a federal judge. The federal judge, if he or she saw some impropriety, has the recourse of dismissing those actions. So in that context, it's really hard for me to understand, why someone would just be fired for just doing their job. Because a lot of these individuals, they weren't supervisory employees. They were line attorneys that were assigned those particular cases. And what you have with the individuals that were fired, you had assistant U.S. attorneys from around the country that did what's known as a detail. So they have a regular job at the U.S. Attorney's Office in any of the 94 federal judicial districts where U.S. attorneys' offices are appointed and actually run those offices. And they all came to Washington to prosecute all those cases. So these are people that sacrifice. They had to relocate in many instances. And now that they've, tried to sacrifice, they prosecute those cases, they're being retaliated against for doing so. So that's certainly very disheartening, not only to, those individuals that lost their jobs, but those individuals that remain at those offices. Now they're going to think twice about, being involved in, difficult cases, because they can think, hey, a few years down the line, I could be terminated as well.
Well, he's sly like a fox in that regard, in that he says things, does things. He doesn't care if he's wrong or right, but the chilling effect of those things, to me, have an impact on the people to come. People, I think, would be concerned about whether or not they follow an order or do a directive or not do it, and the impact that will have upon their future, their homes, their jobs, their children's education. So he is creating a society, in my outlook, that is, it takes away the security that we've had throughout our history of, if we do our job, we are ensured of being employed, and we have a certain degree of stability. That seems to be undercut now, I would think.
Attorney Primes, when I first heard of this, these actions with respect to federal government employees, the first thing I thought was, well, what about the Hatch Act? What happened, with that? But this week, two labor unions have filed a lawsuit um, challenging the administration's effort to reclassify thousands of federal jobs as, quote, Schedule F jobs. And the president had signed an executive order reinstating Schedule F. And that's a classification that he created near the end of his first term that exempts certain, quote, policy influencing positions from those federal protections that you called out, Attorney Primes, the Hatch Act and the Pendleton Act, that protect other federal employees. But that Schedule F is intended to replace civil servant career service employees with Trump loyalists. And two labor unions have filed a lawsuit challenging those actions this week.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And that kind of goes back to my earlier comments, as it relates to, prior to the Pendleton Act, everybody was swept out of office. So what this Schedule F is doing is really kind of taking us back to those days, because it's understandable that you want to change heads of agencies when a new administration comes in. What Schedule F is doing, it's reaching down to individuals that might lead a particular section of the Department of Justice, or a basic supervisor. And that's going to cause a lot of problems, because that's going to be an issue in terms of each new administration, there not being any institutional knowledge. And if you reach too far down with Schedule F, in that presidential year, instead of individuals doing their job on behalf of the people, if they know they're going to be fired come August, hey, they're going to be focusing their energy on finding a new job, as opposed to the work that needs to be done. It's particularly dangerous when you talk about attorneys, because as all of us know, in terms of practicing attorneys, you have answers that you have to file, you have depositions, you have investigations, and if you are not focusing on that and representing your client, but instead focusing on your next job, the big loser is going to be the people of the United States. So I think we need to really proceed with caution. And really, not only at the union level, but at the NAACP level, at the National Bar Association level, really let people know that this is a real direct threat, and it really will undo the lessons that we learned from the Pendleton Act in the late 1800s, and it will lead us back to that time period if we're not careful.
Well, what I don't understand, though, is that it looked like we're being rolled over on this idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion. All of a sudden, we've seen a radical departure from basic human rights. And we're seeing a gross mischaracterization of what the DEI means or stands for. And so my concern is that one of the things that we're seeing nationally in location by location is this constant attack on something that all it does is try to seek fundamental fairness. This issue about diversity, equity, and inclusion that became an issue during a tragedy. The first thing that we had the president say was he tried to blame some DEI hires. And it was just shocking to have something that's so far-fetched and wrong and ill-suited for the event. But just for the record, need to clarify exactly what DEI is. It's basically diversity, equity, and inclusion. Does not mean that you're hiring somebody on preferential basis. But what it means is that opportunities are open to everyone, regardless of their race, sexual orientation, gender. And that's what it stands for. Now, they've characterized saying that you get hired because of your race, which is just a complete fabrication. And just very briefly, the concept of airline, these crashes that we had this week, there were one thing that maybe a lot of people didn't notice is that there's this mass firing across the federal government and that Attorney Prime talked about. But the problem is when you have mass termination, you're going to have a shortage of workers. These are highly skilled workers in the federal government, highly skilled, and their jobs are different oftentimes than the private sector. And so I'm concerned, counselors, about the fact that this constant attack on DEI and what effect it would have on our federal government and our country.
Well, that's what I was trying to say at the beginning of what I said, that he doesn't care about the accuracy of his allegation because many of his followers will pick up that, see, look what they're doing to our society. These foreigners, these immigrants, these minorities, and all these laws that have been passed to allow them to be in jobs that we should have anyway. It goes along with his attack plan. That's my belief. He doesn't.
Yeah, the other thing too, I think that I think your listeners should really pay attention to is that there is an individual by the name of Christopher Rufo, and he has been on a crusade for a number of years, even during the first Trump administration. And if you really look at his bio, he basically admitted in one of his social media posts that his objective is to make the term diversity, equity, and inclusion toxic by, using the most extreme examples and, try to end it all. Now, all diversity and all diversity, equity, and inclusion is basically doing is saying that, hey, we're going to create a wide net and give everybody an opportunity. And that was one of the underpinnings, as relates to the Bakke decision that upheld the Harvard plan in terms of affirmative action. And it was the basis of subsequent Supreme Court cases. So the conservative movement, including Christopher Rufo, said that, hey, if I can destroy that linchpin, I can, eradicate a lot of the progress that's being made. So I think a lot of these efforts aren't necessarily in good faith. It's part of a plan to really bring us back. And I think we really need to pay, careful attention to that. And the other thing I think that we need to do is we need to really educate people that there's a difference between diversity, equity, and inclusion, just opening a wide net, and actually, affirmative action, it's opening, it's giving people opportunities that didn't have opportunities before. And I think, what unfortunately we've allowed to happen, we've allowed people like Christopher Rufo and others to define what diversity, equity, and inclusion means. Instead of this benign meaning that it was intended just to open the net and ensure you're not hiring the same people and getting the same perspective, they're making it a nefarious term, which it really isn't. So there needs to be a lot more pushback in that area, in my view.
Absolutely, Attorney Primes. Again, demonizing a term, right? And then weaponizing it to mean something that it was never intended to be. Diversity equals merit, right? But they're saying we've got to get rid of DEI and replace it with merit. Attorney Nathaniel Lee, your governor's new, Office of Merit and Innovation, and he's got a new term to suggest that DEI is inconsistent with merit. Affirmative action and diversity, equity, and inclusion were never intended to mean that unqualified candidates receive jobs in corporate America or received federal contracts. And I just read a statistics that says that with respect to African Americans, they represent only 1.67% of the total population of entrepreneurs and businesses that receive federal government contracts. Also, diversity, equity, and inclusion is a business imperative for those corporations that have integrated those initiatives into the DNA of their organizations. And so there's a recent McKinsey report, I'll put it in the chat box, that showed that in 2023, the bottom 25% of large companies in terms of ethnic diversity, they underperformed their peers by 24%. And the top 25% that embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion, they overperformed their peers by 27%.
Yeah,
Really
speaking of
important.
that, Counselor, I have Representative Bartlett on to speak to this issue about Indiana. Representative Bartlett,
Yeah.
you're in a fight of your life now with the current governor, sir.
Yes, however, well, good morning, everyone. It's not just this current governor. This has been going on for quite some time. They've led up to this. When we got Stand Your Ground, when they took cursive writing out of schools, made charter schools public schools. At one time, when they prosecutor, when he had seizures, and those dollars that they got in the seizures went to common schools. Healthy lunch programs that they had in schools is now gone. They have methodically, piece by piece, gone in and done this. Now they're more aggressive today than they have been in the past. But they gave us Unigov to keep us from having a black mayor here. Nathaniel, you remember that. And then when we started getting all our at-larges were black, so then they did away with at-larges in the Unigov. They took our right to vote for our judges away from us. Just methodically trying to demean us as a people. And my major complaint is the fact that Black folk remain silent too long and too much.
Well, what about this thing with Martin University? Explain that process. The state of Indiana gives money to private colleges. Why would they take away the $5 million goes to Martin University?
They
The
black.
only black college in the state.
They black. That's why they took it. They black. It was voted in the 2023 budget. Martin, Governor Holcomb said he was going to give Martin $20 million. And when everything went down, it was $10 million. They got $5 million in 2024. They was to get $5 million in 2025. They received the $5 million in 2024. But the governor, one of his first orders of business was to, through executive order, is to remove that $5 million from the budget. And Martin did not get theirs. And that was the only institution that he did that to. These are our tax dollars. And if we don't push back as a people, you got 100 state representatives in the state of Indiana. You got 50 state senators. You've got 5 black state senators out of the 50. And you've got 11 state representatives out of the 100. We can't do it all. We need the voice of the people. We need folk down there raising hell and voicing their opinion.
And Representative Bartlett, one quick thing. Did you and your group ever consider the fact that economics is also should be pursued? For example, each month, the governor is negotiating with businesses to move to Indiana. That's what they do. They go out and recruit business to help the economy grow. But what they're doing is that they're recruiting these businesses to populate in rural areas that you don't have a high degree of minorities. Could the group form a strategy to go after those companies, prevent them from locating here in those rural areas? Because if you start dealing with economic issues, that gets their attention more than anything else.
Well, that's something we certainly need to take a look at. But that's another piece they've been doing. Like they put the prisons in the rural areas, and then they send our Black kids to those rural prisons. And when they do the census, they count them in the prison, but the folk back home in the metro areas and whatever is who is sending them money, who's responsible for them. And so those rural areas get good roads, and because of the census dollars goes to those rural areas and don't come to the areas where the Black folk live. It's all of this is about economics. When you look at the three main pillars, education, health, and prison system, anytime you mention one of those entities, billionaires, you got their attention because that's where the money comes through education, healthcare, and penitentiaries. So we've been resting on our laurels far too long. And my fear is we'll raise hell for the next couple of months, and then we'll go home and say they're gonna do this, they're gonna do that, and they're gonna do the other, and we don't do anything. And I'm not beating up on Black folk today, but we like to meet to decide when we won't have another meeting, and we go to meetings and leave with no resolve. Well, what's the plan of action? What are we going to do? IBLC had a rally Wednesday night at the State House during the State of the State. We didn't attend the State of the State. We had a rally there, and we boycotted the State of the State. But what's our next step? You know, it had quite a few there. I mean, it was standing room only. But where do we go from here? And I'm understanding some civil rights organizations have said that they're going to come up with a plan in 90 days. We don't have 90 days. They knew that this boy was elected November the 4th, the 5th, or whatever it was. They knew back then he was going to be president of the United States. So why we got to wait 90 days from now? It's like we're always chasing. We need to lead. We need to come together with a strategy and move forward, and stop spending our monies where they're getting. I belong to an organization called Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, and I said in 2022 we spend over $1 billion a year going to white-owned hotels and restaurants, talking about how white folk discriminate against us and how bad they treat us. They would be economically stupid to stop, because we keep running back and forth to their hotels and their restaurants in their different cities and spending all this money to talk about, and they are in charge of the audio systems, so they can record everything we say and all of our strategies. They got it. So like, it seems like it takes a long time for us to wake up. And that's my take on it.
Anybody got any questions for Representative Bartlett today?
Well, yeah, I think you say a lot of things that are important. When the president got into office, there had been a lot of talk about Project 2025. And, obviously there's a lot of bad things in that, but there was a plan in place before he got elected. And, there have been a lot of press reports indicating that a lot of those things are currently being implemented and are part of the executive orders that are being issued. So I think you're absolutely right that we need to come up with one ourselves for the African-American community. I know there have been informal discussions with African-American lawyers about getting together to help represent federal employees that may be subject to adverse actions, terminations, demotions, things of that sort. It's been informal. But I would like to see us, do something in that vein to let people know vis-a-vis webinars. Here are your rights. Here are some things that you should consider, in terms of moving forward. There's been a wide offer in terms of, these a buyout, helping people understand, hey, here are the pitfalls, here are the potential things that could happen if you take it. I think those, concrete things I think would be important in terms of moving the ball forward.
Okay. Now, the next issue, we have a flurry of legal issues that permeated this week. One of the big issues dealt with the mass pardon of the January 6th rioters who attempted to overthrow the federal government. And we had a really interesting thing that happened in Indiana. One of the guys who was pardoned, Matthew Huddle, he was killed this week by a sheriff deputy in Jasper County. And what was fascinating about that is that he had extensive criminal history. And of course, he was part of the people that stormed the Capitol and attacked cops and threatened to kill the vice president of the United States. And tragically, he was killed by a law enforcement official. It was one of those stories that kind of resonated because I don't understand the process. I'm in favor of presidential pardons as a general rule, but I didn't understand in this case here why there was a presidential pardon given to everyone, regardless of what they did, and whether or not that person still represent a clear and present danger to our government system.
Well, I think
Marlon,
part of the
how
problem.
did that resonate with the people at the U.S. Attorney's Office that you're familiar with?
Yeah, I think people were very upset. I, serve on a board with people that have worked on that task force, and it was just very devastating to individuals, not only that were in that section that worked on the Capitol riots, but for all the rank and file attorneys. I think one of the things we have to look at is there has to be accountability, and we have to understand the mistakes that have been made that have led us to this particular point. And, those that know me, I try to call balls and strikes as I see them. I think the biggest mistake that was made as it relates to the January 6th is that we allowed that behavior to be deemed normal. In the aftermath of that riot where individuals, stormed the Capitol, we're a symbol around the world. There should have been an immediate appointment of an independent prosecutor, and there should have been immediate prosecution to the highest level. Instead, we allowed this narrative to get out into the media that, hey, it was Black Lives Matter, it was and other people, instead of who it really was. And so when these pardons happen, you have a number of people in the overall community that are really numb to what really happened. I can speak personally about that because my daughter at that time worked on Capitol Hill. I was in a deposition, and many of us that have practiced law, get that fearful phone call where your wife or your loved one is calling repeatedly. You know that there's something wrong. I got a call on January 6th. I was in a deposition. They said, "Are you watching the news?" It's like, "No, what happened?" "Hey, we don't know where our daughter's at." So there were people around the country that had that same gut-wrenching feeling that they don't know where their loved ones were at. And so the problem I have is that legislatures, people in the Democratic Party, this should not have been tolerated. It should have been, the first line of business. It shouldn't have been, hey, these first 100 days, we're going to be nonpartisan. It should have been, no, we're going to get to the bottom of it. These are folks that were yelling, they're going to kill the third person in succession to the presidency, Nancy Pelosi. You had her staff that were in the Capitol, that my daughter knew, that were really trying to fight for their very lives. They didn't know if they were going to be hanged. And so not to do something made that narrative that you saw on conservative media get out there that, hey, these folks were just tourists instead of what really actually happened. Now that horse is out of the barn. But the second problem that I think took place is that, let's imagine the shoe on the other foot, that President Obama had pardoned someone, Black Lives Matter. It would have been all over conservative media. Here's what they did. Here's their history. Here's the crimes they committed. Where are we seeing that in Democratic media or more progressive media? We haven't heard anything. You have to go on shows like this to really find out about, hey, here are the people who've been pardoned. Here's their background. Here's what they did once they got out. I don't hear anything. So I think it's important in terms of what we're doing here today to really trumpet the fact that, hey, it wasn't a tourist visit. Here's what they did. Here's the harm that they caused. Here's how it's unusual, is I think a good first step in terms of this process.
Well, thank you. The next issue this week that we've been in the news and the legality is the mass deportation of undocumented workers and immigrants. And at a point of beginning on this issue, we'll talk about the Fourth Amendment, but what most people did not know is that undocumented immigrant, according to the Institute of Taxation and Economic Policy, they pay $96.7 billion in federal and state taxes. Now, what's significant about that is $59.4 billion will pay to the federal government. And so what funds our retirement, like Social Security and those type taxes, the undocumented workers pay taxes and they will never be able to get federal benefits such as Social Security. So what most people don't realize is by deporting these workers, it will expand the deficit for Social Security. But the first part of that is that the Fourth Amendment, I saw where they were going in schools, churches. Didn't make any sense to me. Does the Fourth Amendment still apply in our country, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen?
Well, according to the judge that issued a temporary restraining order on that executive order, the deportation order, and his order stated, where are the lawyers that these actions, well, I'm talking about birthrights citizenship right now. Attorney Lee, you want to focus on the...
No, I want to hear about this birthright citizenship. That's a big issue
okay,
too.
Okay. The judge stated, where are the lawyers? Because the actions with respect to birthright citizens are blatantly unconstitutional. Period, full stop.
Yeah, but wouldn't it be a Fourth Amendment violation for people to start busting your houses and your place of business without a warrant?
You mean Fourth Amendment, unreasonable search and seizures?
Yes.
I was focusing on the 14th Amendment. Absolutely. Do they have warrants?
See, I don't know any particulars of the cases. This is what I saw on TV. It was horrifying to me. In our city, in our buildings, like in our city county building, in the library and all that, you have a lot of immigrants that do the work of cleaning the toilets and things like that. And in our city, if you want to have a roof done, it's going to be done by immigrants if you got a tall roof. The American workers, they don't want to go, a lot of them don't want to go on the really high roof because they're too dangerous. But the immigrants, they're doing the roofing. So they're doing a lot of hard work that Americans didn't want to do, particularly in the agriculture field. I was watching the story about the farmer in North Dakota, and they were saying that 60-some% of their workers that work in the industry and the cattle or milk and things like that, they're immigrants, undocumented workers. And they had the story of this one gentleman. I don't know whether anybody saw this week. He was saying how important it is to have these workers working in their processing. They work long hours, right? They don't have the greatest pay. And he was a big supporter of Trump. And they said, well, wait a second, what if the president then deport your workers? He said, that would never happen because that would shut down the food industry in America. And then it was just startling comment because he's a supporter. He's got illegal immigrant working for him. And he thinks that if they're deported, it will shut his business down. I just don't understand the logic behind this movement. It makes no sense to me.
Well, part of the problem, Nathaniel, is that, once you had the Fairness Act, which really required broadcasters to provide both sides of perspectives. And so, once that had been eradicated under the theory that, hey, we have so many cable channels, internet, that people will gravitate to, media source A, B, C, D, and they will get a full flavor. Unfortunately, what happened is that individuals just gravitate to one form of media, and that form of media may be inaccurate. There's a lot of people that have these inaccurate views that have no basis in fact whatsoever because their media source is providing inaccurate information. So it does not surprise me that this business owner would not understand, what's in Project 25 and what the president was planning to do. I think, we've seen that in a number of other areas as well. So I think that's something, going back to the representative's point, that perhaps we can do in terms of concrete, is making sure that we're informing our community, about facts, having forums, having shows like this that say, hey, what you may have seen on Facebook or on X or on TikTok, it's inaccurate, and here's why.
We need clear, concise, resonating messages regarding DEI, for example, and what it means and who it benefits. And we have to ensure that that messaging filters down to our communities. With respect to the immigration crisis, we need lawyers to step up to provide pro bono legal services to individuals in our cities that need our legal expertise. And I just put in the chat box a link for attorneys to sign up. It doesn't matter if you specialize in immigration law. The link that I provided will provide training to you to support the pushback on these illegal constitutional actions.
We will post that on the website to Attorney Banks, because I think it's imperative that lawyers be educated to protect the constitutional rights of people, even if they're not citizens of the United States. I think that most people realize that even though you may be a visitor or illegal immigrants, you do have certain rights in our legal system. A lot of people didn't realize that they get hurt on the job, they could get workers' comp benefits, for example. The problem is they just can't get federal benefits, such as Social Security, if they get injured severely at work and can't work anymore in their life. Other than workers' comp benefits, they are really destined to be deprived of those benefits, even though they pay taxes for those benefits in America.
Nathaniel,
Yes.
Yeah, I would like to see, and this is bothering me, so I'm gonna put it out there. I would like to see more information on the January 6th gentleman that was pardoned by Trump as to how his death came about at the hands of the police, because we still have an abuse process going on here in this country with law enforcement. And I never want to endorse execution and judging by law enforcement out on the streets. So I don't support this man's killing, and I don't want to give that impression just because he was a January 6th pardonee or person who was pardoned by the administration. So I don't know, that bothers me that we don't know enough facts to comment on that incident. That's number one. Number two, this administration has stirred up the pot, and it's like Mr. Bartlett said at the beginning, we're chasing our tail. He's taken away our leaders, the celebration of our leaders. We can't recognize the Tuskegee Airmen anymore. We can't do this. And he's got us fighting these things and he's putting up false representatives like, who was it, Vanita, you said is with Clarence Thomas, someone that Black folks recognize and respect and hold on high. So this is crazy times here, y'all. And I just want to get that out there. I don't know what to do.
I think more than ever right now is that we have to rely upon, our ancestors to really put the breadcrumbs out there in terms of how we should proceed, how we can survive. If you look at from 1890 to 1930, most of all the African American organizations were founded. And the NAACP, the National Bar Association, a number of our fraternities and sororities.
Mm-hmm.
And, we just have to support these organizations and work through these organizations to make sure that our people are educated about the changes that are taking place. And then we have, a great group of African-American lawyers that are available to assist, providing that information to our communities, the great work that we all do. And if we just rely upon those institutions, support those institutions, I think, things aren't going to be perfect, but I think that, it will be very helpful for us in terms of, dealing with the challenges that we're going to face in these next few years and on into the future.
Hey, caller, you have a question for us today?
This is Pierre. Are you there?
Yes, Pierre.
Yeah, I got real quickly. I'm gonna run through this real fast. Just want to remember Miss Kaya Duggins, the young attorney that was headed to Howard to become a professor there, who was on the plane. Hopefully, we can get 1 week. We can get back to Milton's fires out there in LA, because I know that's a whole host of legal problems and issues. One other thing I wanted to bring up with the NLRB and the EEOC, I've got a complaint before both agencies, an unfair labor practice and a charge. And I don't have any faith that these, they don't, in the best days, they don't rule in your favor, but they're certainly not going to do it now, because those administrators will be afraid of being fired. And our company president just took a job with Trump's administration. So there you have it. But Nate, real quickly, come Monday morning, that the families, as they should, are going to be getting with the lawyers to file claims against the government. We had an Air Force plane run into a hotel during the HUD-NET administration way back when and kill a lot of people. What's that process going to look like? And lawyers and judges are the last line of defense, and I hope they do their job. I want to thank you for taking my call.
Wow, that's a loaded question, but unfortunately, we're about out of time now.
Yeah.
Terrible tragedy. There will be a whole bunch of lawsuits from both of these, and that's what our civil justice does. And when the lawsuits come about, we'll get the truth of what actually happened You have highly skilled lawyers. They'll be getting discovery. And so they'll get to the bottom of all these tragedies. Not today or tomorrow, but over the next 3 years, we'll find out exactly what happened. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today in our superstar panels. And join us once again as we discuss legal issues of the day. Thank you, everyone. Have a safe weekend.